It was a busy day at the airport. Passengers bustled through the terminals, their hurried footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Among them was a well-dressed black man, dressed in a crisp suit that gave him an air of authority. He carried himself with quiet confidence, his eyes scanning the gate numbers and flight schedules. He wasn't just another passenger today, he had a mission. Unbeknownst to anyone else in the crowd, he was an FAA inspector on a covert assignment to observe and monitor airport security procedures. His task to ensure everything was running smoothly and that protocols were being followed. As he approached the gate counter, he noticed the gate agent, a young woman with short, bright blonde hair, who appeared to be dealing with a particularly stressful day. She was scanning boarding passes and IDs with a routine efficiency, but there was an unmistakable edge to her demeanor. It was clear that she wasn't in the mood for any mistakes. The man stepped up to the counter and handed over his passport, expecting the usual polite exchange. The agent took the passport with a slight frown, her eyes scanning it over quickly before her fingers hovered over the document as if something felt off. The man tried to remain patient, but as her gaze flicked from the passport to his face, he noticed her stiffening posture. She didn't say anything at first, but he could feel the tension rising. Without warning, she dropped the passport onto the counter, her fingers curling around it almost angrily. "This passport is fake," she said sharply, her voice loud enough for the people around them to hear. The words hung in the air like a heavy accusation, cutting through the noise of the terminal. Her eyes were narrowed with suspicion. The man blinked in surprise, unsure if he had heard her correctly. He'd been traveling internationally for years, and his passport had never been questioned. He knew the security checks were rigorous, so he was certain everything was in order. But instead of reacting with panic, he maintained his composure, his tone calm but firm. "I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you're mistaken," he replied. "That passport is legitimate. I've traveled with it several times." The agent wasn't having any of it. She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a thin, dismissive line. "No, I'm afraid it's not," she retorted. "I can tell a fake passport when I see one. You're not going anywhere until this gets sorted out." She glanced over at the supervisor nearby, who was busy with another passenger. The man tried to stay patient. He could feel the stares of other passengers on him, a mixture of confusion and curiosity. But it was clear that the agent wasn't going to budge. The agent's refusal to listen was a clear signal that she had already made up her mind about him. He was guilty, no questions asked. The racial tension in the air was palpable, though none of the passengers could pinpoint exactly why. The agent had made a snap judgment based on his appearance, assuming that because he was a black man, he couldn't possibly be someone of importance or authority. Without further warning, the gate agent's hands were already moving. She grabbed his passport and, with a quick flick of her wrist, tore it in half, right in front of him. The sound of the passport tearing was sharp, a deafening rip that seemed to echo through the terminal. She threw the torn halves onto the counter as if the document were no more valuable than a scrap of paper. The man froze for a moment. He had never been disrespected like this in his life. His pulse quickened, his mind raced, but he didn't let his anger take control. He simply stared at the gate agent, trying to keep his voice steady. "You can't just tear up someone's passport," he said quietly, though there was an underlying intensity in his words. "You can't just rip up a legal document. You have no idea what you've just done." The agent was unrepentant, her demeanor smug. "I don't have time for your games," she said, turning her back on him and raising her voice to call for assistance. "Get him out of here." But the man wasn't going anywhere. He knew he had to take control of the situation, but how? He could already feel the eyes of the people around him, some whispering, others pulling out their phones to record the altercation. He couldn't back down, not now. But the key to winning this battle wasn't in anger or shouting, it was in revealing who he truly was. Slowly, the man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small identification card. He held it up, allowing the agent to see the official FAA logo on the badge. He was an FAA inspector working in disguise to monitor airport security. He'd been assigned to evaluate the efficiency of the staff, and he'd witnessed everything. The agent's hasty judgment, her racial bias, and the disrespectful treatment of a passenger. He'd been watching the entire time, waiting for the right moment to reveal his identity. The agent froze as her eyes landed on the card. For the first time, she seemed to recognize him as something other than a problem passenger. Her hands, which had been so quick to rip the passport, now hung limply at her sides, and her expression shifted from smug confidence to complete shock. She stammered, her eyes darting nervously to her supervisor, who had now approached the counter. The man didn't say another word. He simply stood there, allowing her to process the gravity of her mistake. The silence was almost unbearable, the weight of the moment sinking in. The gate agent, now visibly shaken, could only stammer apologies, her voice trembling. "I didn't know. I didn't know who you were," she muttered, her voice small. Her usual bravado was gone, replaced by the humbling reality of her error. She had just insulted someone who could make her life very difficult. The man nodded, not out of sympathy but out of acknowledgement that the lesson had been learned. His mission in that moment was not only to ensure the safety and professionalism of the airport but to stand as an example of how quickly judgments could be wrong and how one must never assume a person's worth based on appearances. With a simple flick of his wrist, he handed the torn pieces of the passport back to her. "Fix this now," he ordered, his voice calm but firm. The agent's face flushed a deep shade of red, and she rushed to call over a supervisor to rectify the situation. The rest of the passengers, who had been watching in silence, now whispered amongst themselves. Some looked at the agent with judgment, others with quiet understanding, but none could ignore the sense of justice that had prevailed. The gate agent, though embarrassed, knew this was a mistake she would never make again. As the man finally walked away, his seat on the flight secured, and the matter of the passport settled, the tension in the terminal began to dissipate. The gate agent stood there, chastised and humbled. Her actions had been reckless, and now she would have to face the consequences. The man didn't want sympathy, nor did he need it. He had simply done his job. And in that moment, he had taught a powerful lesson about respect, authority, and the danger of quick judgments. As he walked down the hallway to board the plane, he couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served, not with loud protests, but with quiet dignity and unyielding professionalism.